Welcome back to BLOCKTV. This is Links in the Chain, where we speak to the major players that make up the blockchain and cryptocurrency ecosystem. Now, a key in the chain has always been mining. So today we are talking to Jan Capek, co-founder of Brains, aka ShlushPool. Jan, thanks for speaking to us.
Thanks for having me in your show.
No problem. Well, we'll talk about your potentially revolutionary Stratum V2 code spec in just a moment. But I'd like to start with a more macro look at mining. You know, as 2020, the end of the decade is just around the corner, we are just months away from the next Bitcoin halving. My question is this: what is miners' biggest worry or concern at this point in time? I mean, is there a death spiral of mining coming? What is really the impact and the biggest worry for miners at this point?
I believe the biggest question that the miners are trying to answer to themselves is where the price is going to go. As you know, generally I like to explain that miners do follow the price. It's not the other way around. So they are trying to speculate or estimate or analyze the market and what is going to come after halving, which may not be the same scenario as what happened during the last halving, where the price started rising. I'm still positive where since the resource is going to be more scarce, the amount of Bitcoin being emitted every day is going to be lowered by half, as the name of the halving says. The exchange rate might reflect it, but the question is, has this halving been already included into the current price, or is it still going to come? Because we have seen a price spike in the past months as well. This is the biggest concern to the miners who are trying to estimate the size of their investments and where to cap their size of the operation.
Mm-hmm. And let's assume for a moment that the halving is priced into the Bitcoin price right now. Halving comes, miners' rewards are cut in half, and now and as it is, it's hard for miners, that break point, especially with these expensive operations. What does that do to the mining, the mining field, where these people have really, really huge expensive operations? They're opening the biggest ones yet. Bitmain and a couple other companies are doing that in Texas. These multi-million dollar operations. What does that do for miners if the Bitcoin halving is priced in?
If it is already priced in, that means there will be a big problem in running those operations. But at the same time, we have to realize that at this time, there is still a lot of obsolete hardware, I don't want to say obsolete, but there is still a lot of hardware that would get obsoleted by the new generation of machines that are about half, their efficiency is about twice as good as what has been currently deployed out there. So these would be the first operations that would go out of business. And since the percentage of the older machines is pretty high, that means we could expect some drops in the hash rate, which would imply a drop in the difficulty, which would mean that theoretically, let's say, if we could speculate that 50% of the network is still the machines that would get obsoleted by the new coming hardware, and this hardware would need to be disconnected because it is not profitable anymore for some of the operations who cannot afford speculating on the price itself, then theoretically you would have half of the difficulty, and that means that they could theoretically compensate for the halving. But as I said, this is a pure speculation, but it would be definitely interesting time to observe it in May where it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. And do you foresee this cycle being sustainable, where it's kind of a rush where this hash rate is a massive buildup? As it becomes more profitable, people are putting more and more money into these operations just for them to become obsolete the second a new efficient miner is released?
I don't want to speak to this topic as if it's being sustainable or not, because what we're seeing is that miners are trying to search the cheapest places with energy. So they're basically taking care of the leftover electrical energy that nobody wants or nobody wants to use. on the long run, we're capped by the natural resources and also by the supply chains. So the flow of new hardware to the market is limited by what we can physically manufacture. If it's sustainable, I think there is a feedback loop in Bitcoin mining algorithm, which regulates, the amount of hash rate that's trying to participate in that network based also on the price, because I mean miners cannot afford running their operation on a loss for a long time. So in my opinion, the system itself is really taking care of all these corner cases.
Mm-hmm. And speaking about efficiencies and what miners can do to improve their efficiencies, you guys just released the Stratum V2 code. Can you tell me what is in it and what it really aims to achieve?
So Stratum V2 is a new generation. It's pretty much a completely new design of a mining protocol, which tries to address all the issues that we had with the previous mining protocol. To name a few issues with the old protocol, for example, the old protocol had no security at all. So the data was flowing from the mining farm pretty much unsecured towards your mining pool. It was possible to intercept this traffic and redirect part of the hash rate to the adversary. So without miners almost not noticing. So this has been addressed by the protocol by providing a secure communication channel that would be authenticated and encrypted. Second part is that the old protocol was not efficient. It was not efficient in a few ways. The first one was just the pure data bandwidth required by the old protocol. It was text-based, very inefficient. So we tried to using a binary version of a protocol, really saving about 2 to 3 times of the original payload. Second inefficiency that was coming from the old protocol was that miners are distributed new mining jobs. However, if a network finds a new block, miners are supposed to start mining on a new job right away. If they're not, any submits after the block has been found already by the network are rejected by the pools. If you have a protocol that sends you your future job in advance, and when a new block in the network is found, you just get a small notification saying, oh, hey, you should start mining on a new job that I already sent to you. That also implies that the amount of time that this action takes is reduced, which also means that the miner is spending less time on working on an obsolete stale jobs. So this is another efficiency improvement. Third efficiency improvement that we have included into the protocol is that we have natively added support for something we call version rolling. What you can think about it like this: the job that the mining pool sends to the miners currently requires a significant amount of computation when the miner sends you a result back. And the reason is that the miner is pretty much changing some values inside of a coin-based transaction, which is the base transaction that emits the block value. With the new protocol, we kept this feature because it is important for big mining operations. But at the same time, in the new protocol, we have also allowed something called header-only mining, where the miner is only provided a template for the Bitcoin block header and no more details. And what this implies is that the server, when it receives the results, it can process the result much faster, saving CPU time, which also means that the mining servers are going to be less loaded. That would allow processing more connections and so on.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, listen, the efficiency gains really sound incredible. And an interesting thing is we often talk about securities of blockchains. We don't often talk about the securities of mining protocols, and it's really interesting to see you guys implementing that as well. And shifting gears a little bit, I want to get your take on ASIC resistant algorithms. It's always been a buzzword, always talk. In your view, is it real or is it a myth? Is it possible to actually have an ASIC resistant algorithm that stays ASIC resistant?
When we start speaking about ASIC resistant algorithms, I believe we should explain first what an ASIC is. The abbreviation means application-specific integrated circuit. If you design an algorithm that you believe cannot be synthesized in silicon, I believe that you're wrong. You may not be able to synthesize a full algorithm just like you do it with Bitcoin, or how it's being done with Bitcoin with the SHA-256. But to some extent, you would always be able to produce a device that would be sophisticated enough to outperform the current commodity hardware that you have originally believed could be used for your ASIC resistant algorithm. However, the end result is the super complicated mining machine that would even make the boundary for entering the hardware manufacturing industry higher than we currently have with, for example, Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's
so
an
I believe.
Yeah. Sorry, that's
Yeah,
an argument that's commonly stated, and it does seem that these type of moves would even make mining even more decentralized, especially on the hardware side. But what's your take on what Ethereum is trying to do with ProgPow? Is it any different? Did it give them a different opportunity?
With the ProgPoW, I'm not an expert on this algorithm specifically, but it tries to address an algorithm that would be possible to use only on GPUs. Again, the question is, what does your GPU rig look like? At some stage, it's built from commodity components, but I'm sure you could find optimizations that would result from designing a full custom system, which I'm not speaking about silicon. You could be able to use stock GPU chips or some cut down version of these.
Mm-hmm. So essentially, no matter what program you do, what algorithm you write, if there's a high enough price and incentive for it, you can always make a specified hardware for it. Interesting take. Now, in the current power triangle of miners, node operators, and coin developers, in your view, who holds the most power, or do they truly counteract each other evenly?
I would believe this is more of a symbiosis where all these parts of the triangle, live with each other. Miners do need, the coin that they're going to mine. So in case of Bitcoin, we're talking about Bitcoin. People who want to use Bitcoin also are interested in running the nodes. And then finally, you have the consumers who are using Bitcoin to actually do some transactions.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, so you do believe that they kind of do all rely somewhat on each other, and it's not really one dictating the moves of the others.
I don't think so. It was written, I think, in Sadashi's white paper. If this concept of incentives in the system is not strong enough, that would prove that the cryptocurrency cannot exist, and that will also prove that that Bitcoin doesn't exist, doesn't work. And it also would mean that any other cryptocurrency could fail. So we have tried to set up a permissionless and trustless system here that has enough incentives to operate.
Mm-hmm. Now, this is also something else that's been talked about a lot, but what is your thoughts on proof of stake, and how does it affect the future of mining if a big blockchain like Ethereum is ever able to implement it? What effect would it have on the future of mining?
I personally don't believe in proof of stake, and the main reason is that with proof of work, you're physically converting energy to the mining blocks. So what that means is that I can only direct my mining hardware towards one chain. I cannot do both at the same time. With proof of stake, with the original concept, there is nothing that would prevent you to be, co-signing and staking different chains at the same time, because it takes you no effort. You didn't have to put out any effort, and you could work on different chains in parallel. And what that implies is that if I'm a newcomer to that particular blockchain, I have no way to verify that you have used any effort, any energy to actually generate the blocks. So how do I know which of the blockchains is more valuable?
And I guess this is an issue that even Ethereum has not been able to figure out, because they've been promising the switch over forever, and they're still obviously working on it. Really tough one. So far, proof of work, especially for Bitcoin, has been foolproof. Now this last one, this one is for my coworker Asher, who's been nudging me ever since finding out I was going to interview you to ask you about it. But I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the break-even point for miners. You know, that point where it is no longer possible to be profitable because of the amount of electricity costs and the amount of the hardware. Now, how, in your view, how does this break-even point for miners affect their behavior, both in how they mine as well as what they do with their coins once they actually do mine them?
I believe we do have different categories of miners. The smaller miners might be the ones that are not really pushed by their investors into making always rational and business decisions. So they could be actually subsidizing their mining operation in order to speculate for a big price move in the future. However, the majority of the operations today, who are the big the big players, they are driven by their investors, and what they need is a return of investment to some point. So they have to do a very careful financial planning, and that also implies that they have to sell a certain percentage of coins, in some cases most of the coins, so that they can withstand their liabilities towards their investors.
Mm-hmm. All right,
well, so to summarize this, we have two groups people, I would say. One group is able to speculate because they're not in a situation where they really have to pay back for their equipment, which is, I would say, this is already a smaller group. And then you have the professional miners. They have to that have to do very careful financial planning, and this is no more gamble for them. They really are interested into numbers, and they want to see how that works out with regards to the liabilities towards their investors.
Mm-hmm. And final last question before I let you go. What is your future prediction going forwards for mining pools? I mean, it seems pretty clear at this point, the way things are going with Bitcoin. You pretty much have to be part of a pool to really stay competitive. Do you see the pools, the amount of pools that are really in charge right now? There's about 5 or 6 that really are doing most of the mining rewards. Do you see that number growing? Do you think that these pools will become more and be more quantity of them, or do you feel it be consolidating in the future to just a couple of major ones competing?
This is a little tricky question. I believe the concept of the pooled mining itself is slightly changing already, because some pools are already offering products related to mining, so that miners can take care of their finances. So they're offering lending markets, and we have seen projects that do some hash rate trading, difficulty hedging, and these are all added products that are going to be added as a service to the existing pools. On the long run, I do believe it makes sense to have a couple bigger pools, but at the same time, I'm sure there's always going to be an incentive for smaller players to start their own pools and to mine solo, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jan, for sure, I'm sure with the release of Stratum V2, that will have an effect on the pools, especially with these efficiency gains and security upgrades. Jan, thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on how, kind of the inner workings and behind the scenes for mining work. And for all our viewers at home, if you want more on blockchain and cryptocurrency, make sure to check us out at blocktv.com.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.